You wake up. Your body already knows what it needs. There is no hallway, no door, no small tiled room waiting for you. There is only open ground, the sound of the group starting to stir, and a decision about where to walk. For most of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. For roughly 300,000 years, nobody on Earth had a toilet. Not a rich person, not a leader, not the smartest person in the group. Nobody. And yet somehow, human groups survived, stayed relatively healthy, and kept moving across entire continents. So how did they actually manage something we now treat as one of the most basic requirements of civilization? Let's start with the obvious problem. No walls means no privacy in the modern sense. But privacy, it turns out, wasn't really the point. Distance was. Anthropologists who have studied living hunter-gatherer groups, like the Hadza of northern Tanzania, have documented something remarkably consistent. People walk away from the sleeping area before they relieve themselves, often to a specific, somewhat informal spot the group quietly agrees on without ever discussing it. Not because a written rule says so, because it simply works. Waste near camp means smell, flies, and eventually sickness. It's a small, unspoken piece of engineering, carried entirely, in habit and passed down the same way language is, by example. Here's the thing you have to remember about the Hadza, and about every other foraging society ever referenced in a video like this one. They are not a window into the Stone Age. They are modern people, living modern lives, in a modern nation, who happen to make a living the way most humans once did for most of our species' history. Their choices are useful evidence about the logic of that lifestyle, about what works when you are mobile and low density. They are not fossils, and they are not stand-ins for your ancestors specifically. Keep that distinction in mind, because a lot of pop science quietly forgets it, and the difference actually matters. So what do we actually know about the deep past, not just the ethnographic present? This is where the story gets genuinely interesting, because human waste, strange as it sounds, is a surprisingly good historical record. In 2014, a researcher named Ainara Sistiaga led a study on preserved fecal material recovered from El Salt, a Neanderthal site in Spain. Published in the journal PLOS ONE, the study examined chemical traces called biomarkers, essentially molecular fingerprints left behind by digestion, still detectable tens of thousands of years later. The Neanderthal samples showed clear evidence of plant consumption alongside meat. That single detail quietly corrected an old myth, the idea that Neanderthals were pure carnivores, chasing big game and eating almost nothing else. The evidence sitting in their own waste said otherwise, and it said it more reliably than guesswork ever could. Coprolite is the technical word for this kind of preserved fecal matter. It sounds unpleasant. Honestly, it is a little unpleasant. But to an archaeologist, a coprolite is a sealed capsule of information, sitting quietly in the sediment for tens of thousands of years, waiting to answer questions nobody thought to ask out loud, about diet, about parasites, about the daily texture of a life we can no longer observe directly. The oldest confirmed human coprolites in the Americas come from a site called Paisley Caves in Oregon. Dennis Jenkins and his team at the University of Oregon recovered samples dated to roughly 14,000 years ago. The genetic material preserved inside helped establish that people were present in North America earlier than some older migration theories allowed. Waste, in this case, quietly rewrote a chapter of migration history that stone tools alone hadn't settled. This is the detail that gets me every time. The one substance people spent zero time thinking about became one of the most valuable clues archaeology has. Now picture an actual day, reconstructed from this kind of evidence combined with what we know of mobile foraging life. A small group, maybe 20 or 30 people, moving through a landscape they know with real intimacy, the way you know the layout of your own home. They are not wandering randomly. Water sources are mapped in memory, checked and rechecked across seasons. Sleeping areas are chosen for wind direction, shelter from rain, and visibility of the surrounding land. And the places people walk to when nature calls sit downwind, away from the water source, away from where food gets prepared and shared. Nobody wrote any of this down. Nobody needed to. Generations of trial and error did the writing instead, encoded into simple, repeated habit. Children would have learned it exactly the way they learned everything else. By watching, by following, by quiet correction when they got it wrong. Distance also shaped smaller, more immediate choices you'd never think to ask about. Downwind, not upwind, so the smell traveled away from the group instead of through it. Below the camp, not above it, so nothing drained back toward where people slept or ate. Away from the specific bend in the river where drinking water was collected, sometimes by a fair distance, because even without any concept of bacteria, generations of experience had clearly taught people that water taken near waste made people sick more often. None of it was written as a rule. All of it functioned like one. Was it perfect? No, not even close. Intestinal parasites are documented in human and hominin, remains going back tens of thousands of years, and mobility itself was one of the best defenses available. Move the camp every few weeks, and you leave the parasite eggs and larvae behind in the abandoned campsite. The ground, given enough time and weather, resets. Distance and motion did quiet sanitation work long before anyone on Earth understood what a parasite egg even was, let alone how it spread. There's another piece of this worth sitting with, because it shows the same pattern playing out somewhere else entirely. At Çatalhöyük, a large Neolithic settlement in what is now central Anatolia, in modern-day Turkey, occupied roughly 9,000 years ago. Researchers, led by Ian Hodder, have spent decades excavating densely packed mud brick houses built wall-to-wall, with no streets between them. People entered through holes in the roof. Waste and refuse were often deposited in middens, essentially designated trash and dumping areas, sometimes disturbingly close to living space, packed into the narrow gaps between houses. Bioarchaeological work on skeletons from the site has found evidence consistent with the kind of infection load you'd expect from crowded, semi-permanent living, a strikingly different picture from the mobile, foraging life that came before it in the same region. Different place, different millennium, same underlying lesson. Density creates problems that distance used to solve for free. Then something changed everything, and it happened more than once, in more than one place. Around 10 to 12,000 years ago, in different regions at different times, groups began settling down and farming instead of moving with the seasons. And here's the counterintuitive twist. The one that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. Settling down didn't automatically make hygiene better. In a lot of documented cases, it made things measurably worse. Piers Mitchell, a researcher at the University of Cambridge, who studies parasites recovered from archaeological sites across multiple continents and time periods, has documented a clear and fairly consistent pattern. As populations became more sedentary and more densely packed, especially in early farming villages and, later, cities, certain parasite infections became more common, not less. Staying in one place meant waste accumulated near the same living space instead of being left behind with each seasonal move. Stored grain attracted rodents, and rodents brought their own parasites along with them. Denser populations meant infections could spread from person to person far more efficiently than they ever could across a scattered, mobile band. The low-density, high-mobility lifestyle that had lasted for hundreds of thousands of years had, without anyone designing it that way, been quietly doing sanitation, work that settled societies then had to solve all over again, this time with architecture, trial, and a great deal of error. And people did eventually solve pieces of it, with real, deliberate engineering. At Skara Brae, a roughly 5,000-year-old Neolithic settlement on Orkney, off the coast of Scotland, archaeologists have identified stone-built drains running beneath some of the houses, connected to small recessed chambers that function something like early indoor toilets, flushed by nearby water channels. Centuries later, in Iron Age Jerusalem, archaeologists working with peers, Mitchell's research group have examined stone toilet seats from wealthy households, and the sediment beneath them still preserved whipworm and tapeworm eggs, direct physical evidence of exactly what ancient sanitation could and could not prevent. None of this was the invention of hygiene from nothing. It was the reinvention, in stone and drainage, of a problem that mobility and distance had always managed on their own, now requiring deliberate design because a settled community could no longer simply walk away. Here's what I find genuinely remarkable about this whole arc. Once you line it up, the scarab drains, the Jerusalem stone seats, even a modern flush toilet, they're all attempts to rebuild, with increasing sophistication, something a small mobile band did for free, just by moving camp every few weeks. We didn't invent sanitation. We reinvented it, at growing expense, because we gave up the one thing that used to do the job automatically. So if mobility was such an effective, if entirely invisible sanitation strategy, what did losing it eventually cost us? Beyond parasites and plumbing? Here's where the story connects to something researchers are still actively working out, and where the evidence is genuinely thinner than the popular version you may have seen online suggests. A study led by Stephanie Schnorr, published in Nature Communications in 2014, compared the gut microbiomes, the communities of bacteria living in the digestive system, of Hadza foragers, to people living in industrialized countries. The Hadza carried a noticeably more diverse population of gut bacteria. Researchers are still working out exactly what that diversity means for long-term health outcomes, and it would be overreaching, honestly, to claim we fully understand the consequences yet. But the underlying pattern itself, industrialized guts carrying measurably less bacterial diversity than foraging ones, is well documented in the published research and worth sitting with for a moment. None of this is a case for abandoning modern sanitation, and nothing here should be taken as advice about how you personally should live, eat, or manage your own health today. Toilets, sewage systems, and clean water are, without exaggeration, among the most effective public health interventions in the entire history of our species. Nobody watching this should walk away thinking otherwise. What this history does offer, instead, is a strange, useful kind of perspective. The next time you close a door behind you, alone, in a small tiled room with running water and a lock, remember that this exact arrangement, this specific combination of privacy and plumbing, is astonishingly new. For nearly the entire span of human existence, the answer to the question of where to go wasn't written in pipes or porcelain. It was written in habit, in memory, in the quiet, repeated act of walking a little further away, learned from watching someone else do the same thing 1,000 times before you. You wake up. Your body already knows what it needs. This time, there is a door, a lock, a room built for exactly this and nothing else. It took roughly 300,000 years to get here, and on most ordinary mornings, you don't think about any of it at all.